about time we actually got to talking about hockey, isn't it? The nice part about inheriting a relocating franchise rather than being awarded an expansion team is that it can be quantified right out of the gate, rather than simply theorizing about what to do in the expansion draft. Don't get me wrong, that's also fun, and it's something I've spent a great deal of time on over the years myself. But in this case, we have an actual roster, front office team, and coaching staff that can be evaluated. I'm GMPM. Welcome back to the channel. As of this recording, the team has been greeted enthusiastically at Salt Lake International and at Delta Center. The hot dogs have been devoured and the introductions have been made. I do have some thoughts about what we saw at the team welcome party, but I'll get to that later in the video. Now let's take the measure of the organization from top to bottom and evaluate exactly what Utah is inheriting from Arizona. If you're a new hockey fan, let me start by introducing you to a website called Cap Friendly. This is where you're going to go to quickly check a team's roster, salary structure, cap space, individual player contracts, depth charts, things of that nature. We'll be heading over there now because in evaluating a franchise you always have to start at the top with the front office. Your team brass steers the ship after all. You need quality asset management to succeed in the NHL. All the draft picks and cap space in the world mean nothing if they're allocated to the wrong personnel. And NHL history is packed with cautionary tales about bad management. Looking at Utah's young core, its talent pipeline, and its draft assets, clearly GM Bill Armstrong has done a masterful job of building this team and positioning it extremely well for future success. This is really exciting because it can be very successful and difficult to play against as early as this fall. But it's this that will matter far more in 3 to 5 years. This is what we call an embarrassment of riches. 20 draft picks in the first 3 rounds in a 3-year span is obscene. This is what will actually define Utah hockey for the next decade. Also noteworthy is Utah's pipeline of drafted talent still in the junior, college, and minor ranks. I'll be talking about that later on in the video as well, particularly the guys I'm especially hopeful for. But for now, just know that our farm system is incredibly deep and will only get deeper as that wealth of draft picks become actual prospects. Given the team's recent draft history, I have no reason to believe the scouting department is going to screw this up now. One thing I have questioned about Bill Armstrong, albeit as someone who wasn't observing the team as a fan at the time, was the trade of Jacob Chychrun. Chychrun is a star defenseman in this league and was poised to be a centerpiece of the Coyotes' blue line for years to come when he was drafted. So trading him at the deadline last season felt like the team was taking 2 or 3 steps back in its build. What I didn't know was that Chychrun had earlier requested a trade to a championship contender, not necessarily forcing Armstrong's hand. For those new here, this is not the NBA where trade demands carry any real weight, but at the very least posing the risk that the team was likely to lose him for nothing in 2025 when his contract comes up. So Armstrong accommodated Chychrun, shipping him off to a presumably better team in Ottawa where his hopes of Stanley Cup contention would surely be realized, right? Let's see how they're doing with Chychrun on their blue line. Wait, that's not better. So that is not the look of a cup contender to me. That looks more like Chychrun spent the last couple seasons on a team not nearly as far along in its rebuild than the one he requested a trade from. Which means Bill Armstrong is absolutely my kind of GM. I'll have more to say on this matter later, but I can absolutely see this being a case where you trade a guy to a worse situation hoping to see them again in a couple years as an unrestricted free agent when they're at least hopefully more humble. Head coach Andre Tourigny is harder for me to evaluate. He had a cup of coffee with my Colorado Avalanche as their defensive coach at a time the team was not good defensively. Hard to pin that on him when he was only there for a couple seasons and probably didn't have much influence over personnel. He kicked around the NHL for a bit before returning to Canadian juniors and giving a decent account of himself as the head coach of the Ottawa 67s, piling up 50 wins in back-to-back seasons, including the COVID-shortened 2019-2020 season that ended 6 games early. The year before that, the 67s swept their way to the Robertson Cup final, beating every team put in front of them in 4 games until the finals that they would lose to Guelph Storm in 6. So clearly he knows how to get results, and that canceled 2020 playoff season has to be a huge what-if for him. As a fan, I find his coaching system to be agreeable. He does a good job managing the young talent on his roster, likely due to his extensive junior hockey resume. In the Coyotes games I've watched since the talk of the move to Utah heated up, I would call what I have watched sensible, responsible hockey. I've had a lot of fun watching this team in their last handful of games this season, and they've done a good job keeping up with squads like Edmonton and Vancouver, who are considered top-tier teams in the Western Conference. With the right personnel, I don't doubt that Torini can take this team far. Speaking of the team, the forward group is coming in with a lot of hype, justifiably so. By now, you're probably well aware of the driving forces of Utah's offensive core. Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, Dylan Guenther, my personal favorite Lawson Krause, Matthias Michelli, Nick Bjugstad, and so on. What about the future, though? Well, since I'm sure someone has already told you about Connor Geekie, who could be a regular in Salt Lake City as early as this fall, and I'll be talking about him plenty in the future myself. In the pipeline, we also have this puck-handling genius out of Russia named Daniil But, who has been confounding defenses as a member of Lokomotiv Yaroslavl's system. Combined with his playmaking abilities, he has all the makings of a future Adam Oates. However, that doesn't take into consideration his untapped potential. What do I mean by that? Someday he's going to realize he's 6'5" and make it everybody's problem by playing like it. When that happens, Joe Thornton also becomes a reasonable career trajectory for him. He's still signed over in Russia for a few years, and the general consensus is that he's a project guy anyway, but hopefully we'll be seeing him at Delta Center around 2027 or so, and he will add a new dimension to Utah's offense when the time comes. Shifting focus to the defense, let's address the elephant in the room right away. No, we do not have any defensemen currently signed for next season, but that's not a major issue. If you're coming in from basketball fandom and getting ready to panic at the sight of this, most of our free agent defensemen are restricted free agents, which in the NHL means they're barely free agents at all. Once they're qualified with a one-year offer otherwise matching the terms of their expiring contract, any contract offer sheet coming from other teams is subject to right to match and substantial draft pick compensation in the event that the incumbent team opts to let the player leave, although not as restrictive as it once was. Additionally, there's a sort of unspoken gentleman's agreement among the NHL front office community that tendering offer sheets to another team's RFAs is not exactly classy to do, which makes them even more rare if draft pick compensation wasn't enough of a deterrent. Catch the documentary Saving Sakic on ESPN Plus for one of the most famous offer sheet cases in NHL history. Back to the topic at hand, I fully expect all of these RFA defensemen to be qualified and ultimately re-signed, with Vladislav Kolyachonok and Victor Soderstrom still playing the next season with the Roadrunners. This fills out 5 spots on our defensive lineup with Sean Durzi, J.J. Mosier, Yusel Valimaki, Michael Kesselring, and Josh Brown, who is not listed here. I'll circle back to him in a bit. Durzi and Mosier are going to see the most ice time out of this lot and will be expected to make the biggest offensive contributions from the blue line. Another guy I want to point out here is Kesselring, who really got my attention with his physical play down the stretch when the move to Utah became more apparent and I started evaluating the team in earnest. His might be the first Utah jersey I buy, in fact. He plays my kind of hockey. I'm really excited about our defensive pipeline, too, and there are 2 guys I want to shine a spotlight on in particular. The first is Daniil But's Lokomotiv teammate, Dmitry Simashev. Simashev is a big stay-at-home defenseman with hockey sense well beyond his years and skating ability well beyond what you usually expect from his 6'4" frame at this stage of his career. I feel like Utah has a future Adam Foote, Matthias Norrstrom, Darian Hatcher type of throwback shutdown guy on their hands. On the flashier side of things, we have 6'7" Maverick Lamoureux. At only 20 years old, Lamoureux is surprisingly complete. He uses his size responsibly, just as likely to clog up the passing lanes or make a smart poke check to separate the opposition from the puck as he is to swing the momentum with a massive body check. And he has the discernment to know when to do which. He's not just a defensive force either. Lamoureux plays a 200-foot game with a real nose for the net. He is absolutely the Utah prospect I'm most excited to see reach the NHL. Now let's talk goaltending. Honestly, I really like both Karel Vejmelka and Connor Ingram. However, I also don't think either of them are likely to lead the team on a deep playoff run, which sounds like a priority for Ryan Smith even in the team's inaugural season. Of the two, Ingram is younger, has better numbers, makes less money, and has one more year on his contract, in addition to being the first player on the team to express his enthusiasm for playing in Salt Lake City. Make no mistake, that last part is important to Utah sports fans who have grown depressingly accustomed to professional athletes looking for the exit almost as quickly as they arrive here. In contrast, Vejmelka is an unrestricted free agent next summer, counts for over $3 million of the team's salary cap space, and is currently occupying the roster spot that team staff is more than likely already scouting for another player to step into, either via trade or free agency. His role seems destined to be similar to that of Jocelyn Thibault when the Colorado Avalanche began play in 1995. He helped the team get off to a good start as they began play in Denver, but his departure was a direct part of Patrick Roy's arrival, which culminated in an Avalanche Stanley Cup victory that spring. Now, as much as I like this team, I think a Stanley Cup in year one is a very lofty goal for a squad that missed the playoffs this season. But if you install the right pieces, I can absolutely see them stealing a series or two. What might those pieces be? The debate is already well underway and lively on social media. Perhaps the boldest move available would be for Ryan Smith to back up the armored car and throw money at Tampa Bay Lightning legend and future NHL Hall of Famer Steven Stamkos to spend the twilight of his career in the Salt Lake Valley. The idea has merit on the surface level. Stamkos is one of the biggest names in the NHL who would undeniably sell any tickets that haven't already been sold. He has Stanley Cup rings already, and anyone watching these playoffs can attest that he can still go at 34. However, that is really as far as the suggestion can go. First of all, at 34, will he still be ready to win when the window opens for Utah's young core? How much money would it take for him to move on from the only franchise he has ever known to a completely unknown NHL market? Moreover, bringing in a big-ticket UFA is always a huge risk. Playstyles and tendencies don't always transfer well from one team to another. If the incoming player can't play in their new coach's system or can't develop chemistry with their new teammates, well, those are some big ifs to wager millions of dollars on, especially with a salary cap in place. Finally, it's extremely presumptuous to believe Tampa will even let Stamkos remain unsigned all the way to July 1st when free agency begins. I expect they'll get him done well before then. Another suggestion I've heard, albeit similarly flawed, is to swing for the fences and make a big money offer to forward Sam Reinhart out of Florida. Reinhart has effectively played his way out of the Panthers' price range this season, continues to do so in the playoffs, and will likely command $9 to $10 million a year over a 7-year maximum term come July 1st, 8 years if a team trades for his negotiating rights before he hits the open market. At 28, he's not substantially older than his most important would-be teammates. There's no doubt they'll be ready to win championships all at the same time if he were to sign in Utah. But everything I said about the risks involved in signing marquee free agents when talking about Stamkos still applies to Reinhart. Chemistry problems could certainly emerge on the ice. This is something I would consult the players themselves about before cautiously attempting or not attempting to sign him. It makes more sense than going after Stamkos, I'll give it that. However, it's probably just better for us to allocate those roster spots and that salary cap space to developing all the young talent in our organization. None of that is to downplay the importance of veteran leadership, especially veteran leadership that already knows how to win championships. If it's critical that we bring in such a presence, a more economical option would be Chandler Stevenson out of the cap-strapped Vegas Golden Knights. He has 2 Stanley Cup rings, is already familiar with the Intermountain West from his time in Vegas, would find a leadership opportunity in Utah that isn't there on a Knights squad brimming with veterans, and his presence wouldn't really threaten to push our most important young forwards down the depth chart. Kelly McCrimmon's salary cap brinksmanship over the last few years is about to come to bear, leaving Vegas with only about $5 million available to get way more than $5 million worth of the team's free agents signed. Stevenson will be an asset for whichever team pries him loose, and will carry half of the price tag or less than a Stamkos or Reinhart. Now, I personally don't think that our needs are at the forward positions at all. They just get talked about a lot because that's where the highlight reels get made and the glamorous statistics are built. If you really want to position the team to win right away, however, you want to build from the net out. That's why I've already inwardly accepted Vejmelka's departure. There are goalies out there who can take this team on a run. John Gibson out of Anaheim has been malcontent for some time now due to Ducks management not matching his personal desire to win. Elvis Merzlikins, a bona fide number one goaltender, is losing starts on a team with an abundance of talent between the pipes, and is very publicly in agreement with Blue Jackets management that the best thing for both parties is to find him a team where he's the clear starter. Boston has to be ready to move on from the still outstanding Linus Ullmark after Jeremy Swayman has decisively laid claim to the Bruins' goal crease. If you want to get a little wild and conspiratorial, you could connect a few dots and make the suggestion that the Winnipeg Jets could be under the gun to get ticket prices, and therefore payroll, down in order to bring attendance up and duck the threat of relocation, leaving them susceptible to maybe being talked out of presumptive Vezina winner Connor Hellebuck. That may not be the mind-blowing proposition now that it was before the Colorado Avalanche hung 19 goals on him in 4 playoff games, and it's not one that I am presenting at all seriously, but it's still a fun theory and exactly the kind of bold swing I would expect Ryan Smith and Bill Armstrong to play with as they look to tune the team up for its Utah debut. You may have noticed that I also left some flexibility in my projections for the likely defensive roster for this fall, and that's because I expect that we'll be active in free agency come July 1st. One guy I would love to see Utah land is impending unrestricted free agent Brady Shea out of Carolina. I've been a fan of his since his time with the New York Rangers, and I was honestly surprised when he was shipped off to the Hurricanes just due to his sheer utility in every facet of the game. He's good offensively, sensible and capable defensively, doesn't play up to his size as much as I would like, but conversely, plays a fairly disciplined game that doesn't see him getting marched to the penalty box on a nightly basis. His experience and talent would absolutely be an asset to the Utah Blue Line if he wouldn't cost too much money to bring in. I also think it's an appropriate time to have the Jacob Chychrun conversation. Look, the way he left the team isn't going to do him any favors from a PR standpoint. Least of all in a market like Utah where loyalty is valued above just about anything else. I do hope his time in Ottawa has humbled him a bit, but I also have to imagine Utah's desire to win now is resonating with him. He's already associated with trade rumors to Detroit for the final year of his current contract, which makes sense because he played a lot of his youth hockey there in the Little Caesars program. But it wouldn't hurt for Bill Armstrong to at least inquire about his availability and maybe even ask for permission to talk to him and get a sense of his perception regarding the move and the new ownership. He already knows the players. He already knows the system. The main concern that led to his trade demand is in the process of being solved. Honestly, unless bridges were seriously burned with the locker room, I think it's at least worth having the discussion. If a deal can't be made to acquire him back from Ottawa, then maybe we could at least pick him up as a free agent on the open market in 2025. His addition would be, quite frankly, the most substantial and seamless one available for Utah. Finally, I want to talk about our own UFAs, because we've got some. Honestly, I don't think a lot of these guys get done. Relocating teams have a tendency to release a lot of UFAs to try and forge a new identity in a new market, and the desire to be competitive right away is going to galvanize that in Utah. Obviously, there's a spicy tuna that needs to be taken care of, and if there was any doubt of that happening at any point, the welcome party removed it.
I cannot wait to get this place buzzing! Let's go!
Liam O'Brien has an important role to play on the team, protecting guys like Keller, Gunther, Cooley, and Geekie so that they can play hockey without opposing players trying to take liberties with them. Frankly, I believe all the UFAs who were at the welcome party are safely assured to be returning, because it would be really weird for ownership and management to drag them all the way out to Salt Lake to meet a bunch of fans that they have no real intention of having them play in front of. This is why I believe Josh Brown's spot on the Utah defense is really safe. In any case, that is my take on what an upgraded Utah lineup is likely to look like when it takes the ice in Salt Lake City this fall. I don't anticipate a one-for-one duplicate of what I'm suggesting here because, as I've stated before, I'm the furthest thing from a high roller despite what Ryan over at Puck Planet might have you believe, but it is generally representative of what my strategy would be and leaves the team with sufficient wiggle room in order to make some big moves once it's decided the championship window is open, while also keeping in mind that there are some important contracts coming up in the next few years that will have to be handled. But how would you go about it? Let me know down in the comments and let's get a conversation going about it. That's all for now. If you like this video, then please be sure to like, comment, share, and especially subscribe to join this growing community and let YouTube know we've got a good thing going on over here. Click the notification bell to know right away when the next video is up. I'm GMPM, and I look forward to seeing you back here soon.